Hi, everybody. It is Thursday. It is August 29th. It's a wonderful day to be an independent consultant. And it's an exciting day for me because we've got Corey Newhouse from Public Profit here. Um, if you're showing up and wondering about ghosting, well, as one of my colleagues put it, sounds like you're being ghosted by the ghosting panel. Actually, I made a mistake. I didn't follow up with people ahead of time to confirm the session, and three of the four of our folks had made other plans, and that's my fault for not doing a good job of following up. The one person who could make it for the ghosting panel was Corey Newhouse, and I love Corey. She's one of my favorite people. And so I asked her if she would kind of allow us to take this into a broader conversation about her, but we're still going to go into ghosting today. So with that, Corey, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you all today. Really appreciate it.
So Corey, you are based where?
We are based in beautiful Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
But you haven't always been there. You were in Portland for a while, right?
In Eugene, yes. My husband was on the faculty at the business school there for about 6 years. So I was in Eugene, and then we came back to the Bay Area about a year ago. And then we're based here in the Bay Area. We do now have work all around the country, which I can talk about a little bit later.
Sure. Um, so I sent ahead a little interview script, and I'm going to somewhat stick to that. So we might as well go start with that first question. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started, your, what I call the origination story? Where did you come from,
Absolutely.
and why did this public profit thing develop?
Yeah, great question. So important thing to know about my family, we have many entrepreneurs in our family. So my mom and my dad both owned their own businesses. My dad actually just sold his business at the tender age of 84. And so I was about 10 before I learned that not all adults worked for themselves, because the adults I knew did. And so that, I mean, truly, joking aside, I think that really influenced my thinking about sort of what work was, yeah, kind of what mindset I had. I got really interested in evaluation in graduate school. I went to policy school at UC Berkeley, and that was really the first time that I learned about program evaluation. And it just felt like a huge light bulb going off for me of a way to work with mission-driven organizations, be really analytical, have a wide variety of clients or projects, and contribute to causes and movements that I really care about. And so that really got me into the evaluation space. And then, there's nothing like working for somebody else to give you all sorts of ideas about what you do better. We can probably all relate to that. And therefore I had started to think about what my own firm would look like. And honestly, I plan to start my firm probably closer to this point in my career. I got really lucky. The client that I actually did my master's thesis for, the Oakland Unified School District, called me up about 4 years after I finished graduate school, and asked if I would like to be paid to implement my master's thesis. And that I was smart enough to know at that time that that was going to be the only time that happened. Somebody would call me up and kind of hand this opportunity to me. And that was almost 17 years ago.
Is
And
that right?
so there's that aphorism, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And so while I attribute it to luck, it definitely was good fortune that those things lined up for me. But that was the opportunity to get public profit started.
So public profit was just you working with Oakland Unified School District at the outset.
It was, yes. And I knew from the beginning that I wanted to start a firm, and I knew that ideally, I wanted the firm to not be exclusively associated with me. Here in the Bay Area, there's some other firms like Harder and Company Community Research, what was at the time called LaFrance Associates, that were, literally named after their owners. And I respect that. I get that, and I kind of wanted to kind of pre-plan for something different. And also realizing that while I'm a very good evaluator, I'm not great at everything, and that I really had a vision of building a team that could really bring together really exceptional folks into a team, so that we can really all lean on our strengths together. So that was, yeah, that was sort of some of the moves that I made in those early days. I had contractors, like literally like graduate students who were, I'm paying $20 an hour to do data entry kind of things. For about a year, I did hire my first half-time employee about a year in, and then she became full-time about 4 or 5 months after that. So it was just me and the cat for a year or so, and then we got to doubled our size to two people after about a year.
That's crazy to think that you would hire an employee 1 year in. So that's actually, one of the questions. And so you segue perfectly into that. Why did you decide you wanted to go with the firm idea, knowing that you're going to have to take on kind of the bigger risk and the greater amount of, revenue requirements and care and feeding of your associates and things like that, versus the subcontractor route, which a lot of our folks do. So what was your thought process around that? And why did you stick with that process down as you grew?
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a couple different dimensions to that. And a lot of it had to do with the kinds of work that we were doing at the time. So that first project was a multi-site evaluation of school-based after-school programs. Here in California, our state invests quite a lot of public dollars into school-based after-school. I've heard the phrase, I've heard the more than all the other states combined knocked around several times. It's probably true. And that was a project that has, we were doing paper surveys, we were doing in-person site visits. And so it's a pretty big lift staffing wise. And I, and that it was particularly when that first project renewed that I was like, okay, I think this is going to keep going. Like I'm fairly certain this is going to keep going. And I at the time and still really wanted the certainty and predictability of a staff member, of a colleague, rather than a contractor. And that is still very much my point of view, especially if you're trying to grow, because you essentially are prepaying for a little bit more capacity when you have a staff person, and that gives you a little bit more runway to grow. I think also at the time, I knew very few other evaluators, and so I didn't even necessarily have anybody to subcontract with. I think if I were to start my company now, it would be very different. I would structure it really differently. But at that time, that was just sort of the only option. Um, in the intervening years here in California, actually recently the Biden administration has passed some increasing restrictions about subcontracting that makes it more likely that you need to treat subcontractors actually as hourly employees, but that's way down deep in the weeds. For me, really, it was about trying to grow and having that additional capacity. And it was flipping terrifying. I can tell you where I was sitting, what direction I was facing when I made Simone a job offer, because it is very scary. And it continues to be. It gets less scary. I have 16 employees now, but it's, as you allude to, Matt, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge decision, and I very much understand and respect folks who choose to stay a single person or to work with some subcontractors more as collaborators.
So I can answer this question because I lived this experience too, but I'm going to let you answer this question. What makes it scary? I mean, what is the scariness about that, and why? And so I'm sure I know I see people's names on here who are thinking about this, who are debating this. Should I stay subcontractor? Should I hire a person? How do I make that decision? So what are those? What are the things that are scary, and then what are the rewards for having, you know, full-time FTE staff who are working for your firm? And so what are some of those things that if you had to go back and rethink it through, what are those kind of pieces that you'd be thinking through?
Yeah. Um,
Because obviously the benefits outweigh the costs because you continue down this
obviously,
process.
obviously. Yeah. I think, and I think it looks different at different sizes, and definitely my role in public profit has really evolved a lot over time, as you might imagine. Foundationally, that someone is trusting their financial part of their financial well-being to you is the biggie. And I was and continue to be the main business development lead. And so it's an incredible act of faith, especially for that employee number one. I still am very close with Simone, very appreciative of her that she said yes. She didn't need to. And that's the biggie. Even my heart rate's increasing as I say it. And that, I think for us as evaluators, one of the really nice things about the nature of our work is that our contracts tend to be 12-month, 14-month, 16-month engagements. And so that allows us to have more predictable cash flow than less. And so that helped me a lot as I was making the decision about whether to bring employees on, was to be able to look at my cash flow and kind of think about what was my hustle index, how much more business would I need to bring in order to, in order to be able to continue to make payroll. So that was definitely a smart thing that I did, a good move that I made. I think the huge lesson learned, and one of the things that really weighed on me a lot at the time, was just I had never employed anybody. I'd never done this before. The great news is that there are all sorts of services out there for people who are employers. Like, there are lots of small businesses. And so, pay QuickBooks or whoever, to manage the taxes. You can sign up on a health insurance exchange if you want to offer health insurance. And so that was just a huge aha for me of like, yeah, I needed to learn some more stuff, but there was a lot that has already been figured out and systematized at a pretty low price point, that I could then kind of lessen my stress that I was going to mess up somebody's income taxes, for example, just by using one of the many easily available services.
Oh yeah, that's very scary. And I have done some of that myself. I understand that fear. I have several different questions that I could segue onto. I'm not sure which one I want to go to here. Okay, here's a great one. Is there any truth to the rumor that all the best independent consulting firms must employ at least one Jessica?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really core to my strategy, and I think it's, yeah, just really at the root of my success as a business owner is having someone named Jessica.
And how
Definitely.
about Emily's? Do you have any Emily's? We have at least two Emily's. So
We've actually one of our strongest employees ever. The first time actually ever that I hired two people at the same time was because we had such an astoundingly great set of applicants for a position that we talk about scary. It was
yeah.
going to be a stretch to hire one more person, and we literally had such amazing candidates that we decided to hire two. And then I had to hustle a little bit more. She was amazing.
So let's talk a little bit more about public profit. I know you talked about starting within that Oakland Unified School District piece, which is a very education focused evaluation, kind of, at least that's an educational organization. You've broadened beyond that. I know you've talked to me about some of your clients. How did you kind of th think about growth and development, niche, and how did public profit change over time, and what in what ways did you purposefully do this, or did it just fall in your lap and it just kind of like happened to you?
Mm-hmm. And for probably the first 5 or 6 years, we were really exclusively focused on doing evaluation capacity building for youth serving organizations. That was how we were branded. That was how we were pursuing work. That's where a lot of my heart and my expertise lie. And again, because of the policy environment at the time, where California was investing really heavily in out of school time programs, that allowed us some nice lily padding. That we started with the Oakland Unified contract, then we got San Francisco Unified, then we got West Contra Costa Unified. We sort of moved, were able to ladder up there. That got us some really nice economies of scale in terms of some sort of methodologies and back end. There was a point that we were doing, I think, 250 site visits a year to different after school programs, which was a lot. And then kind of a really interesting thing started happening. Two things started happening. And this is, again, Matt, I think to your question of, I remember I sat in on Tessie's conversation, Tessie's talk earlier this summer, and she said something about, in retrospect, this all looks really intentional, but trust me, like it really isn't always. And a lot of, I think a lot of this job is seeing the opportunities that are emerging and deciding whether to lean into them. And so two things happened roughly at the same time. One is one of our education related clients launched a leadership program for staff. So they'd kind of looked around and wanted to kind of enhance leadership opportunities for staff members. Youth development, after school programs have pretty high turnover, as you might imagine. So the idea of making this a career is a really popular one. And the idea of supporting the adult staff to grow is a really smart one. And they asked us to help design the program and to help evaluate it. I knew nothing about leadership development, about adult professional development, but my client trusted me, knew that we were good to work with, knew we would figure it out. Fast forward many, many years, I can share the link with you. We just wrapped up a retrospective evaluation of the MacArthur Fellowship. That was not on my bingo card in the early 2010s. And we've been laddering up, doing more and more evaluations of leadership programs, prizes, those kinds of things to get there. So that was relational. That was based on sort of a really smart idea that one of my clients had that they wanted to take us with. Also, after a while, some of my clients started moving organizations and would take us with them. And really similarly, in some cases, that meant that we would go from one school district to another. But some of my clients made some pretty big jumps in their career and took us with them. And so that was, again, how we got exposure to arts and cultural organizations. That's how we got exposure to kind of very interesting organization called Code 2040 that's in the tech space. I can talk a lot about that. So that was, I would say, a mix of intentional and not intentional, that it wasn't like I was sitting at my desk saying we want to do leadership program evaluation, but figured out that it's a really cool thing, that we're good at it, and built on it. That then has allowed us to kind of keep doing those lily pads, keep doing those steps out to different kinds of clients, to different kinds of topics.
That's good. I mean, it's really interesting. One of the questions I asked, I put in the kind of the advanced script to you was about being participatory and supporting other firms like yourself and connecting with them and sharing what you know with them versus putting up walls and saying, I don't want to share kind of like my secret sauce. And so what's your take on collaboration with other firms, and why do you go about that approach?
I think there's multiple dimensions of that for me. I think a big part of being an independent consultant and especially trying to build a firm is sales. And most of us feel pretty gross about sales, generally because we have had negative experiences. Used car lots come to mind, some cheesy person trying to get you to buy something you don't want to buy, the clear coat or whatever. And yet, if you want to build a firm, if you want to stay employed, you need to do sales in some way. The book Book Yourself Solid by Michael Port has been really influential for me. And I actually learned about it from Tamara Hamai, who a lot of you will know. She gave a talk on Book Yourself Solid in Atlanta at AEA, and it was just like, and a big part of what he talks about is kind of finding your way in sales and kind of finding a way to make that part of the work for you. And I'm a connector. I love connecting people. I love kind of introducing people to each other and sort of helping people build a network. And so that leans into a strength that I have that also helps me to build a really broad network of people And then also being collaborative, especially in terms of sharing some of our stuff. So some of you all may know we have like some guidebooks around dabbling in the data, one called Dabbling in the Data, one called, oh my gosh, Creative Ways to Solicit Feedback. That's part of a business strategy. That is part of demonstrating likability and expertise. It's a Michael Port idea, that people in sales businesses, people aren't going to hand you $20,000 without being pretty sure that they're going to, that you're going to have a good experience. And so giving them an opportunity to kind of get to know you, get to experience you, is good. And then the third thing, and this was another, just like in retrospect, revelation that there are lots of companies that do things like payroll, so just let them do payroll. Many of our best, most interesting projects have been referrals from other evaluation consultants. And that, I love that. I so love that. And so I definitely try to participate in that ecosystem to make that part of how we at Public Profit show up, both in terms of passing along referrals, making connections for clients or engagements that maybe we aren't the right fit for, but also, hoping to have some of that reciprocity. And so that really is to me, it's kind of feeding a bunch of birds with the same seed, if you will, in terms of kind of achieving a bunch of different objectives. And then, Matt, I know you and I know each other through, kind of through business ownership and doing, some collaborative stuff around like getting polls out about what kind of time tracking software we use or what are some of our compensation policies. And some of that, again, is just to help me make data informed decisions. And some of it is also, as you all know, this work can be incredibly lonely. It can be incredibly isolating. I just said the same thing twice. And so having a professional community of folks to get advice, to be able to vent, to be able to be silly, just is incredibly important, especially for my longevity. So that's kind of a part of it too.
You talked about Michael Port and Book Yourself Solid. I put that in there, and I also, as a link to everybody, and I also put in your toolbox, which was a way of, I looked at that earlier today. It's a way to show, hey, we know what we're talking about. Here's some free resources for you. Was that accurate in what you were talking about in your thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think especially in a service business, to show, don't tell is really important. And so much of our externally facing kind of communications and marketing is about, hey, we have helped an organization like yours with a problem like yours, and they're really happy. And that I keep looking for it. Maybe I made it up in my mind. I could swear to you, years ago, I saw a cartoon about like successful marketing, and it was like a little frowny face guy that was like, I have a problem, and then there was a black box that was like, our service, and then at the end was the same guy smiling, and it's like, that's marketing. Like you've got to kind of help people see themselves in what you do, and then you can start talking about what languages are we going to do the surveys in, and how are we going to do the focus groups, and blah 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 blah. But we help people like you with problems like yours is kind of fundamentally the message that we're trying to do. And so the toolbox and our case studies is really to show, don't tell.
So you've started a firm, you've got 16 staff, including yourself. How much time do you commit to doing the work versus, working in the business, versus working on the business is the kind of old catchphrase. Are you a firm director? Is that where you spend all your time, or do you split that between actually doing program evaluation, direct client service work? How do you think about that? And I guess this is in some ways a question to inform some of those folks who are thinking about the firm approach, because I know I get very little time with clients, and in some ways that's okay, because I feel like I've been there, but I think that's something that's a surprise to other people. And so what's your relationship with your clients?
Yeah, and I think this is This is one of the great, what I feel like is one of the great things about being an owner is that you can craft the job in ways that suit you, that fulfill you, more or less. My monthly meeting with my bookkeeper does not necessarily fulfill me, but she's wonderful. She's a wonderful human. Let me tell, but yeah, you know what I mean. My utilization rate is 45%. So about 45% of my time is committed to client-facing work. That means I currently am running three evaluation engagements of my own, and then am sort of the advisor, cheerleader, problem solver on a whole bunch more. And then the balance of my time, the other 55%, is network building, business development, strategic work inside the organization, all the other stuff, all the working on the business kinds of things. That balance has changed over time. Probably it was closer to 70-30 in terms of project-based work and working on the business work. And then it, gradually a step down. And I'll be real. I worked 60-hour weeks for about 8 years. And that was how I built the business. I don't know how I would have done it otherwise, because there is just a time when you've got to be putting in a lot of hours on both. Maybe there are folks on this call who can tell me how I did that wrong. That has changed. My work-life balance is much, much, much better now, because we're a larger team, because we have more systems, but that it definitely is a huge investment of time to build a firm.
Yeah, for me, I overcommitted and then had to figure it out. And then, I said, of course we can do that. We'll get that done. And we always did, but it was oftentimes a lot more labor to find the person or do the work to make those things happen. And we always have, very happy clients. But you talked about two things. I'm going to get into each one of those. One is Michael Port's book, Book Yourself Solid. And every time I talk to you and we talk about books, Book Yourself Solid comes up in our conversation. And I know you have other books that you often reference. Are there any other ones that you want to suggest that people should think about?
This is Matt's very nice way of saying that I'm a broken record, and that basically every conversation I say the same thing.
No, but it's so important to you, and I know how important it was for you. So that I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
There are other books that I know but I don't remember them right now. But I know there are ones that are informative for you, and there's some that you may even be reading right now that I'm not even aware of.
Indeed. So the book Traction, which was actually recommended to me by several other evaluation firm owners, is by a guy named Gino Wickham, I think. And it is so helpful. The premise of the book is kind of how do you go from being a solopreneur to building a firm? And for you as a founder, how do you, in his phrase, let go of the vine? How do you delegate things in ways that don't stress you or stress you out minimally? Because so many of us who started our businesses ourselves are used to doing everything, and we get in that habit. And for a variety of reasons, it's hard to let that go. But then that means that the size of your organization is based on the limits of your human endurance, which is not a good business model. And so he has a really elegant way of thinking about different roles in the business. And then he also has some really terrific, very practical strategies, frankly, for like meeting organization, that when I first read it, I was like, "Puh," and we use it and it's amazing. So Traction, super helpful. The other book that I've really learned a lot from is called Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz, I think is how you say his last name. It is a very similar sort of like, how do you as a small business owner like get policies and systems going and engage your team in continuing to build and improve those systems. And the number one thing I learned from Clockwork, which like is dead simple, but oh my gosh, so helpful, especially because so much of our work is online and virtual. Make a video of it. So rather than trying to like write out the 80 bazillion steps of something and to describe like what it means to be on the left hand of the screen and on the top, but not quite the top, just make a video. And that actually has really shifted. We make videos for our clients all the time. They are not polished. It is literally like, hey, okay, here we go. We're going to look at the thing. And that has really been a huge step forward for us. But that the mindset of Clockwork is really helpful.
Yeah,
And I will
Clockworks.
say
Go ahead.
all three are business bro books that are going to say things like, if you're not growing, you're dying, and like whatever. But there's really helpful advice in all of those.
Clockwork, Michael McCallum, I don't know if I read it in his books or saw it somewhere, but the majority of his readers, he writes in a kind of like bro way, you're right about that. But the majority of his audience, 80%, I think, is like female entrepreneurs who like they're like type A personalities, and they resonate with his kind of like bro talk, and they kind of like push it off and go whatever, but they get it. But that's, for some reason, that's who he says is his audience. So
Yeah.
you might fit that description. Earlier you talked about your to use the term utilization rate. Effectively, you're talking about your client facing time, or your, some people might call it your chargeability or whatever percentage. So that's a KPI, a key performance indicator. What are the KPIs that drive your business that you think are the most important?
And this is again something we got from Traction, that they talk about having a 10-year target, a 10-year focus, and that the thing that gave me, and then kind of a vision for the company in 10 years, and then measurable metrics on the way to that. And the thing that gave me some comfort was that he says, you know, and of course you're going to be wrong. Of course it's going to change, but doing that exercise is really helpful. So that's how we got to KPIs. And so Sherilyn's here, and Sherilyn worked with me for a long time. So I'm like, what would Sherilyn say? Two, I think that I weren't necessarily self-evident and that have turned out to be incredibly important. The median project budget and the median tenure at public profit have been really powerful indicators for us.
Okay, so talk us through those a little bit. Median project budget. So I suppose you're looking at you take 10 projects and then you look at the median, not the average, of the budget that you might have for that. And so we've never had this conversation, but I just started calculating that a couple weeks ago. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So public profit in our 17-year history has always lost money on our smaller dollar projects every time. We take those projects, and so now I'm a lot smarter about what projects we take. We actually have a project mix portfolio goal, which is related to the median size of our projects. So we take smaller projects knowing we're going to lose money, but we do it for very strategic reasons. And that for the first few years, we didn't do it for strategic reasons. We did it just because it was money. And also, especially as a team, you know, a lot of our colleagues are managing 7 to 9 projects at a time, which is too many. It's just too many things, too many meetings, too many moving parts. And so we, for years, have been trying to have fewer projects, but those have to be a larger per project budget so that we can keep growing, or at this point, we're trying to stay about the same size, but have fewer engagements overall. So that median budget size is a really important metric for us. And we've calculated it. We look at it based on our overall costs and utilization rates and whatnot to try to have a goal, so that if everybody in the company were to have 3 to 5 projects, what would the median budget size be? And so that's kind of what we're working toward. And then the staff tenure, probably self-evident, that the longer folks are with you, the more efficient they are, the more skills they have, the more versatile they are. And the bringing on new people is a time intensive task. It's a very valuable task, but time intensive. And so to me, that's a measure of a lot of different things about the kind of workplace, the kind of work that we have, if we're able to hold folks stay with us for a while.
Right. I'm very aware that we've reached the maximum number of minutes that I was hoping to do this interview at, and we haven't even got to some of the key questions. So I want to focus on ghosting. Now, this is how we originally were supposed to meet today to talk about ghosting. And so the idea about ghosting is we make this wonderful connection with this potential client. They ask for a proposal. We think hard. We reach deep. We put together this amazing proposal. We send it out. And then we sit and we wait, and then we wait some longer, and then we wait some longer, and then we send an email and then we don't get a response. Then we send a phone call, we make a phone call and we don't get a response. We have effectively been ghosted by this client. That was this super great opportunity, and we don't know what to think about it because we're getting zero feedback. So what are your thoughts on that? What are ways that you avoid that situation?
Yeah. It happens to everybody. Actually, this morning I was thinking of like one of the biggest and worst that I'll talk about in a minute. Oh my God, it was horrible. Then it was like 15 years into owning the business and it happened. So it unfortunately doesn't stop. But there are things I think that you can do to mitigate it. I definitely try to suss out really early kind of what the decision-making process is for the client. Are they just talking around? Are they honed in on us? Will this be a competitive bidding process? Just to try to understand the landscape and understand my level of effort. I also try to forecast the budget, or at least the budget magnitude, early in the conversation. Because one of the reasons that folks ghost you is you don't talk about money early enough, and you submit your budget and they say, holy crap, and and don't talk to you. And so, even if it's very big picture of like, in our experience, this tends to be a $50,000 12-month engagement. In our experience, this tends to be whatever it is, just to help get their mindset. Because as we've all experienced, people show up and are like, I have 89 cents, maybe 95 cents. And if you could please do a 7-year retrospective, multilingual, mixed methods, and you're like, so that helps. Also, I've learned, and I'm looking at some notes off to the side. I'm happy to share these with you, Matt, if you want to distribute them to the group. Also thinking about how to help your point of contact make the case for you and make the case for your work together. So our work isn't quite as straightforward as some other services, right? Like a CPA, pretty straightforward, and nonprofits have to have them. Whereas an evaluator, maybe we don't always rise to that level. And so, because often, and this is to kind of hedge against me working with somebody in the organization who's really enthusiastic about us, and then they take it to their bosses and their bosses say, what the heck is this? And so kind of helping them to make that case is really helpful. Some brass tacks things that we do now that we didn't do. We include a time limit in our proposals. So we have language that says the terms of this proposal are valid for 15 days from the date of submission. After that point, we reserve the right to make adjustments to the timing, the staffing, the cost. We very rarely invoke that, but it protects us, because we've had people ghost us and then show up a year later and say, hey, we're ready to start on that project that was going to take half of your team's time tomorrow. Bless your heart. So that's one thing we do. I kind of have an escalating sequence of follow-ups, and this is where using project management software like Boomerang or Asana is really helpful. Usually within about a week of submitting something, I'll send a like, hey, how's it going? Any questions? Wait another week. Hey, just checking in. And then I'll start to switch it to say, hey, we're booking up for whatever time period it is. We'd really love to work with you. I want to make sure to get you on the schedule. And if there's nothing, then I'm out. Because there was that book, He's Just Not That Into You, about dating. Same idea. If you are having to run after a client and like force them to pay attention to you, they're going to be a terrible client. And so there's sort of a balance of appreciating that, like, maybe the person went on PTO, maybe their boss went on PTO, maybe they had a procurement process that they didn't know about, and they're just not a good organization to work with. So that's kind of what you're sussing out.
And I just
And
put a link. Go ahead. You were going to say.
last thing, because I think the three big things about ghosting that are hard. It's emotionally difficult. You probably are holding time yourself or other people's time that is going uncompensated otherwise. And what was the third thing? There was a third, I'll think of it. And that you've put a lot of time into the proposal that now is not getting remunerated. And so one thing that we started to do is kind of a two-step process. This is like when you don't have a formal RFP or whatnot, where we'll send a very slightly customized one-pager, two-pager, maybe with an email of like, here's some notes about like how we'd approach it, to as a conversation continuer of like, hey, how does this sound? Do we look like the kind of partner you like? Because that's 20 minutes of my time. And then if they say yes, then we can again kind of double check, and then do something bigger. So those are some of the modes that we've used. To just both kind of understand the situation and then also protect ourselves.
I have so many thoughts on that. I'm not going into them though. James Lipton questions. This is what I call my James Lipton questions. He did the Inside the Actor Studio on Bravo forever. Maybe still does. I'm not sure. He has standard questions he asks. I like to do it for all of our guests. If you had to start all over and did not have your network of clients and colleagues, perhaps start over now, how would you get started with a consulting practice?
I think I would. I would try to work in collaboration with other more experienced consultants like me. I think that would have really shifted that shifts the kinds of engagements that you can get and work on, and get you access to more remunerative projects. So I think if I were to start it like at this point in my career with the, I think I would structure, I would be more horizontal in terms of the team structure, and be more of kind of a coalition or collaboration of senior consultants, senior level folks.
Is now a good time to start an independent consulting practice?
It's a hard time. The job market is garbage. Tech firms are laying everybody off. They're shedding, lots of companies are laying people off. And especially in our kind of work where there are lots of adjacent professions, it can be tough. And so I think that this is a time, if you are starting a consulting practice or wanting to grow, I think this is a time where two or maybe three strategies would come to mind for me. One would be really differentiating yourself in your approach, whatever that might be, kind of what is your calling card. And this is, again, is a Michael Port thing, where he talks about the red rope strategy. You think about your ideal client and you only market to them. You only try to get them. Others will notice you too, but having a really strong niche. Subbing with other large firms. So if you're just trying to build out your portfolio, make some money, lots of the large firms need smaller and local partners. So that's really helpful. And then third would be, to collaborate with other other folks. Like if you're able to team up to make a project team that maybe could go after a larger contract than you otherwise would, or a different kind of methodology than you otherwise would, that would be helpful.
Fantastic. So I want to give some time for everybody to ask questions. We've got about 10 minutes left before the end of the hour. So I'm going to say goodbye to the YouTube folks, and I'm going to open it up for general questions. But thanks for this interview. For the YouTube folks, they can be happy, and we'll do the full like thanks and applause when we stop everything. But see you, YouTube people. Everybody else stick around.